Розпочнемо від
Починаємо, займаємося. Да, ми за хвилину починаємо.
Велике свято День Матері.
6 секунд. Я б сказав, подайте.
Today is May 9, Ukraine Media Center confirms starts its operation. My name is Vasil Samakvalov. Kyiv survived yet another sleepless night, and us too, but it did not become an obstacle for us to start our first briefing. And we will start talking about the venues of Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra and Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra itself, the museums, which is of concern to our society. Whom are we going to talk to? It's Oksana Poviakel, Director General of the National Museum of Folk Architecture and Customs of Ukraine, Artem Paliienko, First Deputy Director General of the National Museum of Folk Architecture and Customs of Ukraine, and Denis Liubarenko, Head of the Legal Service of the National Museum of Folk Architecture and Customs of Ukraine. Okay, so there is a history related to museum, something related to the venues. There is some court proceedings around that venue. So please, Ms. Oksana, tell us what brought you here today. Good morning, everybody. I will try to be quite concise, and I'll try to give you only historic facts in brief. Back in the year 1965, upon the initiative of academic Trinko, Ukrainian Society for Preservation of Monuments of Culture and History was established. Later, upon the initiative of the same academic, the State Museum of Folk Architecture and Customs of Ukrainian Socialist Republic was established. The museum was governed by the Ministry of Culture of USSR back then. It happened so that the academic Petro Trinkov felt more comfortable to manage the museum because he was the first deputy head of the Council of Ministers of USSR back then. And as you know, that any museum should be governed or managed by some institution which is regulated by a ministry. So the Ministry of Culture issued the resolution to transfer the museum under the management of the Society for Preservation of Historic and Cultural Monuments of Ukraine. So this is what happened to the museum back then. Back in year 98, there was a session of the Central Cabinet of the Socialist Party, and during that session, I don't know whether legally or illegally, academic Trinko was deposed, and the museum ends up in the hands of the pro-Moscovian scientist academic Tolochko. And since then until, well, I don't want to be wrong, but I think until the year 2015 he was the formal head of the museum, but de facto it was his deputy who was managing the museum, who switched from the Communistic Party of the Soviet Union So this deputy found his place as the head of the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. So all this time, no one ever had time to take care of the museum, which was then transferred to the Academy of Science of Ukraine. And back in year 2012, it ended up in the hands of in the Ministry of Culture and Tourism of independent Ukraine. So this is the history of museum itself, and until this very day is the state property. There were never thoughts that it should be handed over to some private owner. So its collection of exhibits belongs to the state as well. So what museum are we talking about? It's the famous museum which is called Museum in Pirogovo. And the fundamental of this museum is its exhibits. As long as there are no exhibits, museum cannot even be founded. And starting from 1969, the museum started gathering its exhibits, and to place them, the government back in the day provided the venue of the Lutheran Church. You remember Soviet times, back then there could be no private property, there could be no other property than state property, and that church was the state property as well in the street of Luteranska. And just like any other church, it was turned into a storage facility where the exhibits were stored. In the year 96, when the Lutheran German Evangelistic Society, or I may be mistaken about its exact name, they addressed the government of Ukraine, the community of the Lutheran Church of Germany, addressed the Ukrainian government to return to their ownership what used to belong to them before nationalization by the USSR. And the government of Ukraine has undertaken the decision to hand over the exhibits to the hotel complex number 19 of Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, which was back then governed by Kyiv Municipal Administration. I don't remember its formal name back then, but I think it was called Kyiv Municipal Council as well. And the resolution was taken. Well, if the journalists are going to be interested, I have copies of all those documents with me. I apologize. And in year 96 there was a resolution which contemplated that Ukrainian Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage should be provided the venue of the hotel complex number 19 of Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra for storage of the exhibits of the National Museum. Back then it was called the State Museum of the Folk Architecture and Customs of Ukraine. Ukrainian government was always reading it until the World War, so it was thought that that venue was only for the location of the exhibits of the museum, but its area is 3,000 square meters. And in year 96 there was a security agreement signed between Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra and the museum to have the exhibits stored at that venue, specifically for storage of the exhibits of the museum. There was no single word saying that it's only provided to the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. So when museums started getting agitated in this regard, because we got very little space for storage of our exhibits, it was real narrow space there. So the museum I was not working in the museum back then, but the museum started being agitated, and this is when that security agreement was violated, and it was turned into the lease agreement, no matter that it said in the security agreement that there should be no lease agreement. So then it was saying that 1400 square meters are being rented by the museum. Meanwhile, the rest of that area was rented by the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. So they leased that property to any kinds of organizations that have nothing to do with either museum or preservation of cultural heritage in general. Well, again, I have those documents with me, and if you just enter Google and you know how the legal addresses are being provided, there are more than 100 legal addresses provided for that premise. So every such case could be addressed with the court, and any such agreement can be rendered void. But we decided to go in a legal way, and back in year 2004, when the museum was handed over to the Academy of Science of Ukraine, and moreover when in 2012 it was handed over to the Ministry of Culture, just like Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra, back then there should have been changes made to the resolution dated 96, or otherwise that resolution should have been cancelled. I'm not even mentioning that it was not notarized, and since 2004 there is a law in effect of Ukraine to have all such operations made through the Fund of National Property, and there is a violation on top of another violation, and this is why we asked to have this briefing today. It's related to the huge number of speculations around this issue. For example, on the internet I've seen mentions that is the radar policy of Minister Tkachenko, but those are my laurels actually, because I was fighting for that venue to have it allocated for the preservation of our exhibits only. It's only our responsibility, and we want the state property to stay the state property, to preserve its status, and the state museum, which is a face not only of Kyiv but of all Ukraine, with our collection of exhibits, to be preserved at some normal venue. Meanwhile, 10 or 15 rascals just want to take over that property. And you know that there is a good saying when they say capture the rascal, trying to draw everyone's attention from himself. So calling the ministry or our museum a raider, only those can do so who stay there illegally, who pay no single hryvnia for rent, because as a civil organizations they have no right to stay there. It's just another civil organizations like 1,000 others that are active in Ukraine. I have nothing against civil organizations. I was treating the Ukrainian Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage well, but I never thought that they should pillage the state, that they should raise one of the best museums, and destruction of this collection that is located there, it's the destruction of the collection. Well, if there are any questions, please ask me. Well, yes, because I've heard it, but I didn't make out a lot. So who's the owner? The owner is the state. So who is the manager? The manager is the Ministry of Culture, and it's on the balance of the Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra Reserve. So what's your aspiration? What do you actually want? We want to keep our exhibits preserved in the venue that was described in the first resolution that is not complied with within the last 27 years. So is the right of the manager? No, we addressed the fund of national property, and we wrote a letter to the Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra. We act in accordance with the law, unlike the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. So the location of your exhibits there, should it be described in an agreement, in a lease agreement, or how? Well, again, is the Fund of National Property, upon coordination with Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra Reserve, and the Reserve of Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra should coordinate this issue with the Ministry of Culture. Okay, then the third question. So the Society for Preservation of Cultural Property, the people who are currently there, they are staying there based on what documents, and why is it illegal? Well, in fact, the situation is as follows. They stay there. There was a resolution by the Cabinet of Ministers in 1996 about handing it over to the Society for Preservation of Cultural Exhibits, for museum exhibits. In accordance to this resolution, there was an agreement number 6 entered into, which contemplated the hotel complex for use for location of the museum exhibits. But now the new civil code is in place, in compliance with which all the lease agreements entered into for the term of 3 years and more should be notarized. If it's not notarized, such agreement is null and void, and it does not require a court procedure to nullify it, because it's already contemplated by the law. So all the agreements that were entered into before the year 2004, in compliance with the transitory regulations of the civil code, they should be re-entered into as per the new civil code. So it means they should be notarized. Back in year 2004, in fact, the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage should have re-entered those agreements in as per the form contemplated by the law in effect back then. So now we have the situation that the Society is based on the agreement, which is null and void. So its invalidity is in fact envisaged by the civil code, so they have no legal grounds for staying there. So in your legal point of view, the Society references the fact that they rent that venue, but in fact they cannot rent it. Well, I apologize, but the most important thing there is that on the 21st of April this year, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine cancelled the resolution dated 96, and this is how the Society started all this noise, because when we were mentioning that violation, they were trying to find any reasons. They were referencing the 96 resolution that allows them to stay there, and the Cabinet of Ministers cancelled that resolution, so it does not exist anymore. And this is when they started talking about raidership, when they started accusing us of raidership. Well, the history is such that the government approves a lot of resolutions that are in conflict of one another, so it's no new story. So what is the logical legal resolution? Who should be the owner? Who should be authorized? Whom should the government authorize to re-enter into all those agreements? And in your opinion, who should sign those agreements? How should it look in a perfect world? Well, in the perfect world, they should not stay there. A new agreement should be signed, and the resolution dated 96 should be complied with to place all the exhibits of the Peregovo Museum in that venue. And the Society should just leave those premises. Well, the question which may be of concern to everybody, since Lavra venues, everything around Lavra is very hot. We know that there's a lot of legal entities there and the question of Ukrainian Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage and the hand of Moscow. How is it related there? How are they connected? Well, the thing is that, well, I just want to say that in Lavra, without blessing of the people, you could not stay there. Well, it was possible actually, but what's most horrible is the Kremlin Moscow intervention that was capturing the heads and hearts and minds of many people, and everybody who was staying there, they were running to Pasha Mercedes for his blessings. Well, it's no secret that Mikhailo Kolonyak now is the head of Ukrainian society, and when he was the Minister of Culture of Ukraine back in Yanukovych times, it's a famous story. When his cabinet, he said that he would not enter there until Pavlo, well, I don't know, his title, Pasha Mercedes, what he is called by the community, before he baptizes his cabinet, his office. He refused to enter there, but for the time being I see no component here, no religious component. What I see though is that any such movements that lead to restoration of that government that was pro-Moscovian, that did not let us sleep this night by shaheds and missiles, and our people were dying again. So this time, today, it's even more cynical than ever. And if anyone is curious, please go online, check YouTube for that video which provoked me to this briefing. It's so pro-Moscovian. If the journalists are curious, I will leave a link for them. So it's a pro-Moscovian video where they walk around our exhibits and they show, like a great scientist Frolov, in only Russian language, he showed the hangers where the employees hang their coats and dry them, but those are all the exhibits of the museum. And again, there were people breaking into that venue recently who wanted to inventory the exhibits. They came from the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage, and they wanted to inventory the exhibits together with the tax administration representatives. The exhibits that they have nothing to do with actually. They wanted to legalize their presence there in that way, to explain that all those exhibits, that they are the property of the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. So if now they don't react to this resolution, I will only address the law enforcement agencies. Well, is there anybody on the floor who has questions, who wants to find out more about this complicated story? Well, I see that we don't have questions. Maybe your explanation was quite holistic. But again, about the structure of the solution, who should take what decisions, what resolutions, who should sign which agreements with whom to avoid the scandal. Look, all the resolutions are already taken. It's only that the resolution of the government should be complied with as of April 21 this year. Even if we guide ourselves with this nullified agreement, but again, if we even imagine that it's still in effect, within the next 3 months the society should vacate the premises, and within that period all those who want, they should submit their applications to the Fund of the National Property of Ukraine, both us and the Society for Preservation of Cultural Property and any other organization. They should address the management of the Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra Reserve to talk to the Fund of National Property and to ask to provide that premise for preservation of our exhibits based on the legal grounds. It should all comply with the law. I just want everybody to comply with their obligations, because the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage, they never had such a right. It's not that they were deprived of it by the cancellation of resolution. So we just reset the situation and we start working from scratch. So let's imagine those exhibits belong to nobody other than the state, and they are managed by the Ministry of Culture and are on the balance of Kyiv-Pechersk Lavra Reserve. So we're talking about legal resetting of situation. Yes, exactly. We have not started any activities on throwing them out of there. We submitted our report to the Fund of National Property, and you know, now they call it raiders activities in relation to the hotel. But again, it's been 2 years that the society asks me to vacate those venues because they found the investor who is about to build the hotel there is their initiative that they're trying to incriminate to the minister or the museum. Thank you. Well, quite comprehensive, but again, if there are no questions, well, it's interesting. Roman Kuharuk, Information Agency, Natia. You say that there were 15 people apart from Kolynyak. Can you name them, at least 5 of them? And the second thing, this society that you mentioned, it's created back in USSR. What is status now? Who appoints the management? Does the Ukrainian state take any active part in that process? So the society was created back in year 65 as a civil organization. In year 92 they got re-registered and they announced themselves the successor of that society that existed until year 92. Is it the UNESCO organization? No, it has nothing to do with UNESCO. It's just a Ukrainian civil organization, Ukrainian Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. So it's not even a state company. Back in the day it was a noble mission, because you know that in Soviet Union a lot of cultural heritage was destroyed. You remember a lot of monuments were destroyed. And back then they played a very important role. They were joining a great number of Ukrainians around them, the protectors of cultural heritage, the art actors, historians. That was a real good and powerful organization, and this is why I feel so hard waging war with them, because in my memory they are a useful and necessary organization, but they lost their meaning. And they were trying to manipulate that during all those years of independent Ukraine. They were trying to convince everybody that thanks to their activities and upon their coordination, all the construction, for example, should be happening in the historic places of Kiev and all over Ukraine. So all such issues should have been solved through coordination with them. That was not right and that was not true, because it's up to other government authorities. They can only work as the advisory body, and they can only draw someone's attention to it, like the attention of the government, the state, the community, but they are not a decision maker. They are not a government organization. They are not a government authority. So until the last year, the collegium, the board, had many good, interesting protectors of the cultural heritage, the historians and the I'm the art actor myself. This is the environment that I live in my whole life. I know a lot of people from that crowd. That organization was very close to me. So you asked me about the 15 names, but 15 names is just a figure of speech. There are no real 15 people. There is a manager, there is his deputy Marina Buryanova, there is an accountant, there is yet another deputy Venedikt Balaban. You can Google his name. So I named you the board, or what do they call it? So that's the body that was selected during the last minute. And so it's Franz Gabsburg, Maria Buryanova, Gennady Slivka, Vera Segryanska, very interesting personality because she's the manager of the anti-corruption department, or director of the anti-corruption department with the what's its name? The cabinet of ministers of Ukraine. That's an interesting and great law enforcer. Viktor Vechesky, he's an architect. Marina Kocherenko, Venedikt Balaban, whom nobody knows, Mikita Vasilenko from Kyiv University, Boris Andrasyuk, who is a photographer and who was a deputy head of the Ministry of Defense, Svetlana Strelnikova, and Sergei Semkin. Me, as a person from this environment, I only know 3 of them who are involved in cultural heritage preservation activities. So this is the board that exists for the time being. And if we touch upon that issue, I was only curious about the legality of the venues. But again, I can say that I distance myself consciously from taking part in their internal struggle, but I know for sure that almost all of them, almost all of the heads of the municipal regional departments of the society, they wrote a joint letter to the rest of the members of the society to deem that board illegal, and they want to restore the glory and the right activity of that very necessary society. Why I'm saying this? Artem Paliienko, sitting by my side, is the first deputy of Director General. Within the last 5 years, he was a member of the construction council of that society, and he was not invited to that session. Again, Nelly Kovalska, who is the Director General of Sofia Kievska, who was not invited either. Sergei Krolevets, who was the head of Lavra for a long time, who is a part of this organization, the society as well, he was not invited either. And Igor Likhovy, whom you know very well, who was the director of the museum, and back in the day was a Minister of Culture, he is a member of the organization too, so he was not invited either. And many others who were creating this civil organization, the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage, so they were not invited to this session. So this is the problem situation about this case. I was the member of the board. I keep confusing them, the collegium of the board, so I was not invited either to that meeting. So this is the situation around the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. Thank you. Thank you. No more questions on the floor, or there are questions left? Please, thank you very much. Good morning, Marina Shenkarenko, Ukrinform. I have a general question to everybody. We already mentioned Mykola Kolonyak today. As we know, he used to be an official back in the days of Azarov and Yanukovych, and now he is appointed the new head of the Society for Preservation of Cultural Heritage. in your opinion, why he was elected to this office? Thank you for this question. I don't have any specific opinion, but I know that he was recommended by Vera Segryanska, whom I just mentioned, who back in the day she was a part. Oh yeah, she was the head of the department for anti-corruption department back in the government of Azarov and Yanukovych. But what I know from the rumors that she was recommended to Marina Buryanova from there, and obviously they offered it to Mikhail Andreevich. He was always interested in the issues of culture. He's the director of the Cultural Institute at the Academy of Stuff. And now there are rumors that they got a lot of debt. That is no secret. Maria Buryanova, she has a lot of debt. It's on YouTube. So the society owes more than 1 million hryvnias in indebtedness, and Mikhailo Klenak helped them to repay that debt, and that he was supposed to be a person who can bring the society to the new level. I can only tell you about the facts that are on YouTube, so everyone can find out about them. Thank you. We will keep tracking the new problems that arise around Kyiv-Pechersk, Lavra, and different premises over there. So we will be waiting for the new guests. And today we were talking with the National Museum of Folk Architecture and Customs of Ukraine and the situation around the hotel complex number 19. Our next briefing will be at 12:30. We will be talking to Yuri Malashko, the military governor of Zaporizhia region, about the so-called evacuation of Russians from the territories that they temporarily were occupying. See you shortly.